The galaxy, vast and ancient, hummed with the quiet arrogance of established order. For millennia, the Conclave of Harmonious Spheres had governed the spiral arms from their crystalline spires on the world of Aethel Prime. They were the architects of peace, the arbiters of progress, the self-appointed guardians of cosmic stability. Their members, graceful, long-lived species like the crystalline lumini, the telepathic mycelians, the stoic, multi-limbed Cathar, moved through the stars with the serene certainty of beings who believed the universe's rules were written in their own elegant script. Conflict was a relic, scarcity, an aberration, evolution, a gentle, guided slope towards ever greater refinement. Then came Earth, not with fanfare, not with diplomatic overtures, but with the ragged, desperate gasp of a species clawing its way out of a gravity well it had nearly poisoned itself into oblivion within. Humanity arrived not as equals, but as refugees. Their ships were cobbled together monstrosities of salvaged metal and jury-rigged systems, trailing plumes of inefficient fusion exhaust like the smoke of a dying fire. Their bodies were soft, fragile things, prone to disease, decay, and irrational bursts of violence that baffled conclave observers. They called themselves Homo sapiens. The conclave, after brief, dismissive analysis, labeled them mortuus terra, Deathworlders. A biological curiosity, a cautionary tale, a problem to be managed, contained, and ultimately forgotten. They were never invited. Not to the grand assemblies beneath the twin suns of Aethel Prime, not to the trade routes humming with exotic energies, not to the shared knowledge vaults whispering the secrets of the cosmos. Humanity was relegated to the fringes, granted a single barren system on the galactic rim. Sol Prime, a cold, rocky world orbiting a dim red dwarf. A cosmic doghouse. A place to fade away. But humanity doesn't fade. It fights. On the surface of Sol Prime, the wind howled like a banshee across plains of rust-colored regolith. It carried the grit of a dead world, scouring the reinforced plasteel of Outpost Theta. Inside, the air tasted stale, recycled one too many times, thick with the ozone tang of overworked machinery and the underlying scent of human sweat and anxiety. Commander Aris Thorne stood before the main viewport, his reflection a ghostly overlay on the desolate landscape. His face, etched with lines deeper than his 40 years should allow, was set in grim lines. His eyes, the color of storm clouds over a battlefield, held a weariness that went bone-deep yet burned with an unextinguished ember. Behind him, the command center buzzed with a low thrum of tension. Techs monitored flickering holoscreens displaying sensor sweeps that consistently came back empty. Too empty. The usual background chatter of distant stellar phenomena, the faint whispers of conclave patrol routes, all silenced. It was the quiet before the storm, and Aris knew storms better than most. Anything, Jax. Aris's voice was gravel, low and controlled. Jax, hunched over a console, didn't look up. His fingers danced over the interface, calloused and stained with grease. Negative, Commander. Long-range sensors are clean. Too clean. Like someone scrubbed the local space-time with a sonic broom. Comms are dead silent. Not even static. He finally swiveled his chair, his young face pale beneath the harsh overhead lights. It feels wrong. Aris nodded slowly. He'd felt it too. A pressure in the air. A wrongness in the silence that had settled over Sol Prime for the past 3 solar cycles. The Conclave hadn't sent their usual quarterly supply drop. No diplomatic ping. No arrogant, condescending broadcasts reminding them of their place. Just nothing. An absence that screamed louder than any alarm. Recall the perimeter drones, Aris ordered. Full internal lockdown. Seal the blast doors, and get me Lieutenant Vanya Rostova. Jax's fingers flew. On it, sir. Vanya entered moments later, moving with the coiled grace of a predator. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, emphasizing sharp cheekbones and eyes that missed nothing. She wore the standard-issue gray fatigues, but they couldn't hide the wiry strength in her reign or the quiet intensity that radiated from her. She'd been a scout on the toxic jungles of old Earth's last habitable continent before the Exodus. Sol Prime was practically a vacation spot by comparison. Commander, she acknowledged, her voice crisp, devoid of unnecessary inflection. Vanya. The silence. It's not natural. I want eyes on the outer rim. Take the Wasp. Full stealth protocols. See if you can find what's making the void hold its breath. Vanya's gaze flickered towards the viewport, then back to Aris. A flicker of understanding passed between them. This wasn't routine. This was the calm before the Conclave decided to finally erase the Deathworlder stain. Understood. Launching in 5. As Vanya strode out, Aris turned back to the desolation. He remembered Earth, not the blue marble of history vids, but the choking smog, the acid rains, the wars fought over the last drops of clean water, the desperate scramble just to breathe. Humanity hadn't just survived that. They'd forged themselves in it. They'd learned to fight dirty, to endure the unendurable, to find strength in the broken places. Out here, under the cold gaze of alien stars, that same fire burned. They weren't refined, they weren't elegant, but they were here, and they refused to be erased. High above the galactic plane, aboard the Conclave flagship Harmony's Resolve, Archon Valerius observed the holographic projection of Sol Prime. His form was tall and slender, composed of interlocking plates of pearlescent chitin that shifted subtly with his movements. His multiple eyes, clustered like dark jewels, reflected the cold light of the display. Beside him, Sub-Archon Kalen, younger and less certain, shifted his weight nervously. The mortuous Terra outpost remains quiescent, Archon, Kalen reported. His voice a series of soft clicks and chimes translated by the ship's systems. Their primitive sensors are blind to our cloaked fleet. They suspect nothing. But Valerius didn't turn. His focus remained on the tiny, insignificant speck of rock designated Sol Prime. Good. Let them dwell in their ignorance a little longer. It is efficient. His voice was smooth, devoid of malice, yet colder than the void itself. To Valerius, this was not cruelty. It was hygiene. A necessary pruning of a dangerous, unstable element threatening the delicate equilibrium of the Conclave. The Deathworlders' history was a litany of self-destruction and violent expansion. Their very biology screamed instability, short lifespans breeding recklessness, emotional volatility hindering rational discourse, a terrifying capacity for violence born of constant struggle. They were a cancer, and cancers must be excised. The cleansing fleet is in position? Valerius asked, his chitinous plates clicking softly. Affirmative, Archon. The Cathar dreadnoughts, the Lumini energy projectors, the mycelian biodisruptors, all primed. The final authorization sequence awaits your command. Valerius finally turned his cluster of eyes towards Kalen. There was no triumph in them, only the weary resolve of a surgeon about to perform an unpleasant but necessary procedure. The Conclave has debated this for cycles. The evidence is irrefutable. Their presence is a contagion, their potential for chaos infinite. We act not out of hatred, sub-archon, but out of responsibility, for the greater harmony. Kalen bowed his head slightly, though a flicker of unease crossed his features. He'd studied the Mortus Terra archives. He'd seen the vids of their exodus, the sheer desperate will it took to flee a dying world in ships held together by hope and welding torches. He'd read fragmented reports of their internal conflicts, yes, but also of impossible rescues, of communities rebuilding from ashes, of individuals sacrificing everything for strangers. It was messy, illogical, but undeniably alive in a way the serene, predictable Conclave species sometimes felt sterile. Of course, Archon, Kalen murmured, the clicks sounding hollow even to himself. The greater harmony. Valerius turned back to the projection. Initiate protocol Silent Dawn. Commence the cleansing in one solar cycle. Let the galaxy forget the Deathworlders ever existed. Vanya Rostova piloted the Wasp, a needle-thin reconnaissance skiff, through the debris field marking the outer edge of the Sol Prime system. The ship's stealth systems hummed, bending light and sensor emissions around it like water flowing over a stone. Her eyes scanned the passive sensors, her mind racing. The silence was absolute. No comms chatter, no engine signatures, no background radiation anomalies. It was as if the sector had been vacuum sealed. Then a flicker on the gravimetric sensor. A distortion so faint, so perfectly masked, It would have been dismissed as noise by any less experienced pilot. But Vanya had hunted predators in jungles where the only warning was a displaced leaf. She knew the signature of something hiding. She adjusted the wasp's trajectory minutely, angling for a better passive scan. The distortion resolved slightly. Not one signature, dozens, hundreds. A vast, silent armada, cloaked and waiting. The sensor feed painted a chilling picture. Canthar dreadnoughts, like obsidian mountains. Lumini cruisers, shimmering with contained energy. Mycelian vessels pulsing with organic light. The entire might of the Conclave's cleansing fleet. Her blood ran cold. They weren't just watching. They were preparing for annihilation. She slammed her fist on the comm override, bypassing standard protocols. Theta control. This is Rostova. Massive hostile fleet. Cloaked. Bearing 030 by 220. Estimated strength entire Conclave armada. They're here to wipe us out. Repeat. Silent Dawn is. Her transmission cut off abruptly as a proximity alarm shrieked. A Cathar patrol skiff, smaller but faster, had detected her energy bleed. Veneer yanked the controls. The wasp, screaming into a violent evasive maneuver. Plasma bolts. Silent in the vacuum but visible as searing streaks of violet light, lanced past her viewport, vaporizing chunks of asteroid. She poured on the thrust, weaving through the debris field, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had to get the warning back. A direct hit rocked the wasp. Alarms blared, hull integrity failing. Life support critical. The viewport cracked, spider webbing before her eyes. Through the fractures, she saw the sleek, predatory shape of the Cathar skiff lining up for the kill shot. Back on Outpost Theta, Eris Thorne stared at the static-filled comm screen where Vanya's transmission had died. The words echoed in the sudden, suffocating silence of the command center. Silent Dawn, entire Conclave armada, wipe us out. Jax's voice was a strangled whisper. Commander, what do we do? Eris didn't answer immediately. He looked out at the barren landscape of Sol Prime, then down at his own hands, scarred, calloused human hands. He thought of Earth's ashes, of the Exodus, of every impossible thing humanity had survived. They'd been given a doghouse on the edge of oblivion. Now the owners were coming to put them down. A slow, grim smile touched his lips. It wasn't a smile of joy. It was the baring of teeth. We don't hide, Eris said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that cut through the fear in the room. We don't beg. We don't fade away. He turned from the viewport, his storm-gray eyes blazing with a fire that had kept humanity alive against all odds. We crashed their damn party. He strode to the central command console, his movements sharp, decisive. Jax, scramble every drone we have. Overload their reactors. Send them screaming into that fleet like kamikaze fireflies. Vanya bought us minutes. Let's make them count. He slammed his fist onto the general alert. Klaxons began to wail, bathing the command center in pulsing red light. All hands! Battle stations. This is not a drill. The Conclave is here to erase us. Show them why they call us Deathworlders. As the outpost erupted into frantic, terrified activity, Weirs activated the emergency channel, his voice booming through every speaker, every comm unit on Sol Prime. Listen up, you bastards out there. You think we're just some fragile little species you can swat aside? You think because we're soft, we're weak? You think because we bleed, we'll break? He paused, the Klaxons screaming their counterpoint. Outside, the first overloaded drones streaked into the sky like dying stars. You invited yourselves to our funeral, Eris snarled, his voice thick with the fury of a cornered animal and the defiance of a species that refused to die quietly. But you forgot one thing. He leaned closer to the mic, his next words echoing with the weight of 10,000 years of human struggle. We brought the coffin. The transmission cut off. On the main viewport, the first Cathar dreadnought, its cloak failing as it powered weapons, began to emerge from the void like a leviathan rising from the deep. Its weapon ports glowed with building, apocalyptic energy, and then the sky above Sol Prime exploded, not with the Conclave's weapons, but with the sacrificial fire of 100 human drones slamming into the lead dreadnought's shields in a chain reaction of raw, uncontrolled fusion. The blinding flash filled the command center, casting Eris Thorn's silhouette in stark relief against the viewport. A small, defiant figure facing the end of his world. The Conclave fleet, caught utterly off guard by the suicidal aggression, recoiled. Shields flared violently. Alarms blared across the Harmony's resolve. Archon Valerius watched the unexpected detonation on his display, his chitinous plates clicking in sharp, rapid succession, the Conclave equivalent of stunned disbelief. "Impossible," he hissed, the smooth certainty in his voice cracking for the first time in centuries. They attacked first?" Sebastian Kalen stared at the screen, his unease crystallizing into dawning horror. The Mortis Terra weren't just fighting back, they were charging. Before Valerius could issue a new command, before the Conclave fleet could fully recover from the shock of the unprovoked in their eyes assault, a new alert flashed across every Conclave ship. It wasn't from Sol Prime. It was from the core, from Aethel Prime itself. A massive, unidentified energy signature, crude, brutal, utterly alien to Conclave technology, had just erupted from the heart of their capital world. A signature that screamed human. Valerius whirled, his multiple eyes wide with genuine terror. What is that?" The display zoomed in, through the crystalline spires of Aethel Prime visible even across light years. A plume of fire and smoke was rising, and superimposed over the feed, flickering with static but unmistakable, was a human symbol, the old, pre-Exodus flag of Earth, blood-red and stark against the burning sky. Silent dawn hadn't just begun. It had already been hijacked. Chaos. Not the elegant, controlled chaos the Conclave philosophers debated, but the raw, screaming, gut-wrenching chaos of sudden, catastrophic betrayal. On Aethel Prime, the heart of galactic civilization, the unthinkable had happened. While the cleansing fleet focused its might on the insignificant speck of Sol Prime, a human strike force, impossibly, inconceivably, had breached the planet's defenses. Not with stealth but with overwhelming brutal force. They'd used captured Conclave freighters, jury-rigged with stolen plasma cutters, and fueled by desperation, to slam through the orbital defense grid like battering rams. They'd landed not in the pristine gardens, but in the industrial underbelly, the forgotten maintenance tunnels beneath the crystalline spires, and they'd brought fire. Archon Valerius stood frozen on the bridge of the Harmony's resolve, the image of his burning capital seared into his consciousness. The serene certainty that had governed his existence for millennia was shattered. How had the Deathworlders, confined to their barren rock, orchestrated this? The logistics were impossible. The intelligence required, non-existent. Yet the evidence burned before his eyes. The symbol of Earth, a relic of a dead world, now flew over the ashes of Aethel Prime. "Recall the fleet," Valerius roared, his voice cracking with uncharacteristic panic. "All ships, break engagement, maximum warp to Aethel Prime, now." But it was too late. The Conclave fleet, designed for precision strikes and overwhelming force against predictable foes, was caught in disarray. Human drones, piloted by volunteers knowing it was a one-way trip, swarmed like angry hornets, targeting sensor arrays and engine nacelles. Outpost Theta, its defenses minimal, was unleashing everything it had: salvaged missile pods, overloaded power conduits fired like crude railguns, even chunks of the planet's own regolith hurled by makeshift mass drivers. It was messy, inefficient, suicidal, and terrifyingly effective against an enemy expecting surrender, not a berserker charge. On Sol Prime, Eris Thorn watched the Conclave fleet begin its panicked withdrawal on the main screen. Relief warred with a deeper, colder dread. They'd bought time, maybe saved their own skins for a few more hours. But the real battle had just shifted. To Aethel Prime, and he knew, with chilling certainty, who was leading that desperate assault. "Jax," Eris said, his voice hoarse, "patch me through to the Odyssey." The Odyssey. Humanity's last greatest hope. Not a warship, but a colony vessel, retrofitted in secret over decades with scavenged Conclave tech, hidden in the Oort cloud of Sol Prime. Its mission, if Sol Prime fell, to flee, to find a new home, to keep the ember of humanity alive. It's Captain Alara Vance. Jax's fingers flew. Static hissed. Then a woman's voice, strained but steady, filled the calm. Theta Control, this is Odyssey. Report. Alara, Aris said. The name heavy with unspoken history. They're hitting Aethel Prime, hard. Our people, they're there. A pause. Then Alara's voice, stripped of its usual calm, laced with pain. I know, Aris. I authorized it. When the Conclave cut comms, when we realized what Silent Dawn meant, we couldn't just wait to die on Sol Prime. We had to strike at the heart. Captain Rostova. She volunteered to lead the ground team. Vanya. Aris closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The scout who'd seen the fleet. The warrior who'd flown into hell to warn them. Now leading a suicide mission on the Conclave's capital. How did you even get there? Stolen freighters. Decades of hoarding every scrap of Conclave tech that drifted near Sol Prime. Smuggled components. Desperate gambles. Alara's voice hardened. We used their own arrogance against them. They never scanned the garbage scows we sent out for recycling. Never thought Deathworlders could be that clever. There was a bitter edge to the word. We're inside their walls, Eris, but we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. We need the Odyssey. We need its guns. We need its people. Eris looked at the retreating Conclave fleet on the screen, then at the burning image of Aethel Prime. Sol Prime was lost. It had always been a dead end. The real fight. The only fight that mattered now was for the soul of the galaxy, and humanity was making its stand not on the fringe, but at the very center. Understood, Captain Vance, Eris said, the weight of command settling on him like a physical yoke. Outpost Theta is evacuating. We're coming to you. Hold on, Alara. Hold on for us. On Aethel Prime, the air tasted of ozone, burnt crystal and blood. Human blood. Vanya Rostofor crouched behind the shattered base of a once pristine crystalline obelisk, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Her fatigues were torn and stained, her face smudged with grime and something darker. Around her, the remnants of her strike team, 20 men and women who had boarded those freighters knowing they'd likely never see another sunrise, huddled in the ruins of the Grand Concourse. The initial assault had been a shockwave. They'd breached the lower levels, overwhelmed the minimal security with brutal close-quarters combat. Human ingenuity meeting Conclave rigidity. They'd fought with knives, with jury-rigged shock prods, with the sheer, terrifying ferocity of cornered animals. They'd planted crude explosives on power conduits, collapsing sections of the gleaming city onto pursuing Cathar shock troops. They'd used the mycelian's own biosensors against them, flooding areas with aerosolized irritants that sent the telepathic network into agonizing feedback loops. But the Conclave was waking up. Reinforcements poured in. Energy weapons, precise and deadly, cut down humans who strayed from cover. Lumini constructs, shimmering with hard light, advanced with implacable patience. The humans were being pushed back, block by block, their numbers dwindling. Vanya checked her sidearm. A Conclave pulse pistol, jury-rigged to fire. Nearly empty. She looked at the faces around her. Young faces, old faces, faces etched with exhaustion and the grim acceptance of their fate. They'd done the impossible. They'd brought the war to the Conclave's doorstep. But holding it? That was another matter. Rostova. A voice hissed from a nearby alcove. It was Bren, a wiry engineer who'd jury-rigged half their explosives. He held up a data slate, his hands trembling. We cracked it. The main Conclave network hub, it's shielded, deep underground. But we found a maintenance conduit. It leads right to the primary power nexus for the planetary shield generator. Vanya's eyes narrowed. The shield generator. The Conclave's ultimate defense. If they could cripple it, even for a few minutes. Thermite charges, Bren said, his voice tight with fear and determination. Planted right on the primary coolant lines. It'll melt through the shielding. But it's a one-way trip. The conduit's narrow. Only one can fit. And the blast, it'll be contained. But the heat, he didn't need to finish. Vanya knew. She looked at the faces of her team. at the burning sky, at the symbol of Earth hastily spray-painted on a nearby wall already half-melted by plasma fire. Someone had to do it, and she was the best infiltrator they had. "Give me the charges," Vanya said, her voice flat final. Bryn hesitated, then nodded, handing her the heavy cylindrical devices. "Make it count, Lieutenant." Vanya slung the charges over her shoulder, checked her pistol one last time and met Bryn's eyes. Tell them we crashed the party." She turned and slipped into the dark, narrow opening of the maintenance conduit, disappearing into the bowels of the enemy's world. Aboard the Harmony's Resolve, Archon Valerius watched the tactical display with growing horror. Reports flooded in human insurgents deep within Aethel Prime's infrastructure, causing cascading failures. The planetary shield flickered ominous. The cleansing fleet was still light minutes away, scrambling to reorient after the chaotic retreat from Sol Prime. His perfect ordered universe was unraveling at the seams, torn apart by the chaotic illogical violence of the Deathworlders. Archon Kalen approached, his usual deference replaced by a desperate urgency. "Archon, the shield generator's coolant system is failing. Sensors detect a massive thermal bloom in Sector Gamma 7. It's human thermite. They're trying to melt the core." Valerius whirled, his chitinous plates flaring wide in alarm. "Seal Sector Gamma 7. Flood it with cryogas. Dispatch Cathar shock teams. Stop them." But it was too late. On the display, a section of the planetary shield generator complex vanished in a silent internal detonation. The shimmering dome protecting Aethel Prime flickered violently, then collapsed entirely. A collective gasp went through the bridge. Without the shield, Aethel Prime was naked. And then from the edge of the system, a new signature emerged. Massive, powerful, brute force engineering clashing violently with stolen elegance. The Odyssey. Alara Vance stood on the bridge of the Odyssey, her knuckles white on the command chair's armrests. On the main viewer, Aethel Prime hung in space, its crystalline beauty marred by smoke and fire. Below, the Conclave fleet was still disorganized, caught between the retreating elements from Sol Prime and the sudden vulnerability of their capital. "Target the Conclave fleet," Alara ordered, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "Focus fire on their command ships. Disable, don't destroy if possible. We need to break their coordination." She paused, her gaze fixed on the burning planet, "and open a channel to the surface, to Rastov's team. If anyone's still alive." The Odyssey's salvaged Conclave weapons, crude but powerful, lanced out. Plasma beams, less precise but far more destructive than the Conclave's surgical strikes, slammed into the Harmony's Resolve's shields, buckling them. Smaller human frigates, cobbled together from freighter hulls, swarmed like piranhas, targeting engines and weapon mounts. Chaos reigned. The Conclave Masters of Order were fighting a war they didn't understand against an enemy who fought without rules, without honor, without the luxury of retreat. Humans died by the dozens on the surface, but for every one that fell they took 3 Conclave soldiers with them, using the environment, using traps, using sheer terrifying unpredictability. Then a miracle. A weak, static-filled signal crackled over the open channel. "Odyssey. This is Rostova." Vanya's voice was weak, strained, barely audible over the roar of collapsing structures. "Shield. Down. Generator. Gone. Tell Aris. Tell him we held the door." The transmission dissolved into static. Alara closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "Acknowledged, Lieutenant. Rest easy. We're coming through." The Odyssey surged forward, its engines screaming, leading the ragged human fleet towards the heart of the Conclave. On the bridge of the Harmony's Resolve, Valerius watched his fleet crumble under the unexpected human assault. His flagship shuddered under another brutal impact. Alarms blared. Reports of catastrophic damage flooded in. His perfect plan, his centuries of careful governance, lay in ruins, burned by the reckless fire of the Deathworlders. He turned to Kalen, his multiple eyes filled with a dawning terrible understanding. They didn't just attack," he whispered, the clicks of his voice trembling. "They invaded. They came for the throne." Kalen looked at the burning Aethel Prime, at the human fleet carving through the Conclave defenses with brutal efficiency. He thought of the Mortuus Terra archives, of their history of rising from ashes. He thought of Vanya Rostova sacrificing herself in a maintenance conduit. He thought of the symbol of Earth, defiant against the flames. "Archon," Kalen said, his voice surprisingly steady. Perhaps they were never just guests. Perhaps they were always contenders." Valerius stared at him, then back at the viewscreen. The Odyssey was bearing down on them, a monstrous testament to human audacity. In that moment, the Archon of the Conclave saw not just invaders, but something far more terrifying: successors. Before he could respond, a massive explosion rocked the Harmony's resolve. A human frigate, its engines overloading, had rammed the flagship's primary weapon array. The bridge lights flickered and died, replaced by the hellish red glow of emergency lighting and the fires consuming the ship. Valerius stumbled, his chitinous plates scraping against the deck. He looked out the main viewport, not at the attacking humans, but at the burning heart of his civilization. The serene spires of Aethel Prime were collapsing. The Conclave was dying. And then through the smoke and fire on the planet's surface, illuminated by the Odyssey's searchlights, he saw it. Not just the Earth flag, but something new, something crude, yet powerful. A banner being raised on the highest remaining spire. A fusion of the old Earth symbol with the shattered crystalline lattice of Aethel Prime. A declaration. Humanity hadn't just crashed the party. They were claiming the throne room. Valerius let out a sound that was neither click nor chime, but a raw, guttural rasp of utter desolation. The Conclave's millennia of peace, its carefully constructed harmony, ended not with a philosophical debate, but with the brutal, messy, undeniable force of human will. The Harmony's resolve listed violently, its death throes beginning. Valerius closed his eyes not in prayer but in final, crushing acceptance. The galaxy belonged to the Deathworlders now. The throne room of the Conclave wasn't a room, it was the grand concourse of Aethel Prime, a vast open-air plaza beneath the twin suns, once a place of serene contemplation and elegant discourse. Now it was a charnel house. Smoke coiled from shattered crystalline structures like spectral serpents. The air reeked of ozone, burnt chitin, scorched metal, and the coppery tang of blood, human and alien alike. Bodies lay tangled in the rubble. Cathar warriors with limbs torn off by crude explosives. Mycelians curled in death throes from neurotoxins. Lumini constructs shattered into glittering shards. And humans, so many humans, their gray fatigues dark with blood, their faces frozen in the rictus of final defiance or the slackness of exhaustion. At the center of the devastation, where the Archon's dais once stood, a makeshift command post had been erected. Salvaged consoles flickered erratically, powered by jury-rigged cables snaking into the ruins. Eris Thorn stood there, his uniform torn and stained, a bandage wrapped haphazardly around his forearm. He looked older, harder, the lines on his face carved deeper by grief and the weight of impossible choices. He watched as the last pockets of Conclave resistance were mopped up, not with the Conclave's clinical precision, but with the brutal, efficient pragmatism of soldiers who knew the cost of hesitation. The Odyssey hung in low orbit, a battered leviathan, its hull scarred by plasma burns and micrometeorite impacts. A testament to the journey from the fringe to the center. Alara Vance stood beside Aris, her face pale but resolute, her eyes scanning the ruins with a mixture of sorrow and grim satisfaction. They'd won. Against all odds, against the entire might of the established order, humanity had seized the heart of the galaxy. But the victory tasted like ashes. "Report," Aris said, his voice rough. A young tech, her face smudged with soot, looked up from a console. "Conclave fleet, scattered, Commander. The Harmony's resolve is breaking up in orbit. Survivors, minimal. Ground resistance, pockets in the lower sectors, but they're surrendering. They're asking for terms." "Terms?" Aris scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound. "They offered us none. They came to erase us." He looked out at the ruined city, at the bodies of his people. "We don't negotiate from weakness. We dictate." Alara placed a hand on his arm. Iris, we can't rule through fear alone. Not if we want to build something that lasts, not if we want to be more than just conquerors. Her eyes held his, pleading for the man she knew beneath the commander's armor. Remember Earth, remember what happened when we only knew how to destroy. Eris looked away, his jaw clenched. He remembered the ashes. He remembered the wars. He remembered the exodus. He also remembered Vanya Rostova's final transmission. We held the door. They hadn't just fought to survive. They'd fought to claim a future that couldn't be built on the same ashes they'd just created. Before he could respond, a figure emerged from the smoke near the edge of the plaza. It was Subarchen Kalen. He was alone, unarmed, his chitinous plates dull and cracked, one of his limbs hanging uselessly at his side. He walked with a limp, but his posture held a dignity that hadn't been extinguished by defeat. He stopped a respectful distance from the human command post, his multiple eyes fixed on Eris. A tense silence fell. Human soldiers raised their weapons, fingers tightening on triggers. Eris held up a hand. Stand down. Kalen inclined his head slightly. Commander Thorne, Captain Vance. His translated voice was weary but clear. I come not to fight. I come to speak for those who remain. Eris stepped forward, his storm-gray eyes meeting Kalen's cluster. Speak then, quickly. The conclave is ended, Kalen said, the words heavy with finality. Archon Valerius perished with his flagship. The great houses are broken, the harmony shattered. He paused, gathering himself. We fought you because we feared you. We saw only your violence, your chaos, your short, brutal lives. We saw Deathworlders, not people. He looked around at the devastation, then back at Eris. But in your victory, I see something else. I see the cost you paid. I see the sacrifice of Lieutenant Rostova, melting the heart of our shield to give you a chance. I see your fleet, cobbled together from scraps, fighting with a ferocity born not of malice but of the desperate will to exist. He took a step closer, ignoring the weapons pointed at him. You crashed our party, Commander. You took the throne. But what will you do with it? Will you rule as we did? From a position of assumed superiority, imposing your will on others you deem lesser? Or will you build something new, something that acknowledges the chaos, the pain, the life that you represent? Eris was silent for a long moment. He looked at Ilara, who gave him a small, encouraging nod. He looked at the faces of his exhausted, grieving soldiers. He looked at the ruins of Aethel Prime, a monument to the fragility of even the most seemingly eternal orders. He thought of Sol Prime, their barren doghouse. He thought of Earth, their cradle of fire and ash. We don't want your throne, Eris said finally, his voice low but carrying across the plaza. We don't want your harmony built on silence and exclusion. He gestured to the ruins. This is what happens when you try to prune the garden too neatly. You kill the wild things that make it strong. He turned fully to Kalen. We're not here to replace you. We're here to change the game. The galaxy isn't a garden to be tended by a few. It's a storm, and we've learned to sail in storms. He paused, letting the words sink in. Gather your people, Kalen. The ones who surrendered, the ones who are left. Bring them here, not as prisoners, as participants. Kalen stared at him, his multiple eyes wide with disbelief, then dawning hope. Participant in building what comes next, Eris said, a new conclave. Not of harmonious spheres, but of survivors, of species who understand that strength isn't just in elegance, but in resilience. That peace isn't the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice. That the galaxy is big enough for chaos and order, for short, fierce lives and long, contemplative ones. He looked out at the smoke-streaked sky where the Odyssey hung like a promise. We crashed the party because we were never invited. But the party's over. Now we build a new one, together, or we all burn. Kalen bowed his head deeply, a gesture of profound respect. It will not be easy, Commander. Eris allowed himself a grim, tired smile. When has anything worth having ever been easy for us, Subarchen? Weeks later, the Grand Concourse was still scarred, but the smoke had cleared. Makeshift shelters stood alongside the ruins. Human medics worked alongside hesitant mycelian healers, tending to the wounded of both sides. Cathar engineers, under the watchful but cooperative eyes of human techs like Jax, began the slow work of clearing rubble. The air still held the scent of destruction, but beneath it something new was stirring. The smell of shared labor, of tentative trust. At the center, where the Archon's dais had been, a new structure was being erected. Not a throne. A round table, made from salvaged plasteel and fragments of the shattered crystalline spires. Symbolic, imperfect, human. Eris Thorn stood beside it, looking out at the changed landscape. Alara joined him, handing him a steaming mug of synth coffee. A small luxury salvaged from the Odyssey's stores. Kaelin's bringing the first delegation, she said quietly. Lumini elders, mycelian rootmothers. Even a Cathar warlord who surrendered his dreadnought. Eris took a sip, the bitter warmth a small comfort. Think they'll listen? They listened when we stopped shooting, Alara replied. Now they'll listen because they have no choice. And maybe because they see something in us they lost long ago. She looked at him, her eyes softening. You did it, Aris. You gave them a choice. I gave us a choice, he corrected. To be more than just the Deathworlders they feared. As the first alien delegates approached the table, their forms alien, their expressions wary but curious. Eris felt the weight of the past, the ghosts of Sol Prime of Earth, of Vanya Rostova, and all the others who hadn't lived to see this moment. The cost had been astronomical. The throne they'd taken was built on a mountain of ashes. But as he looked at the round table, at the tentative steps towards a new beginning, he understood the final, brutal truth of their victory. They hadn't just taken the throne. They'd earned the right to sit at the table. And the galaxy, vast and ancient, would never be the same. The wind blew across the grand concourse, carrying the dust of the old order and the seeds of the new. Humanity, the uninvited guest, the Deathworlder, the survivor stood at the center of it all. Not as conquerors but as architects. The party was over. The real work had just begun.